Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of season two of the Blue Dog Whisperer. I'm Evan Grollman, and today I have a very special guest. Last time on the Blue Dog Whisperer, we had someone from Washington State, all across the country, John Hensel, on, and he did a great job. And this week I have a new guest. His name is Richie the Trucker, and Richie is from my home state of New Jersey. Richie, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, thank you. And Richie, you are a Blue Dog too, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, we are going to be talking a little bit about Blue Dog policies. Um, but what I really want to get into is that, Joe Biden's presidency, there's so much going on. And there is a lot of, how you say, um, friction between not only the Democrats and the Republicans, but the moderate wing of the Democratic Party and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. So a lot of times, it's the party divide is blue dogs versus Democratic Socialists and progressives. So I want to get into what you feel are the major differences between the blue dogs and the progressives, and why you feel that the blue dog wing of the party is the preferential wing for reasonable people.
Well, in my opinion, the big difference between the progressives and blue dogs comes, with cultural issues and identity politics. In my opinion, the blue dog Democrats, I think they focus more on domestic and American issue, while progressives they're obsessed with identity politics and social justice and stuff like that, which was good back in the 1960s and 50s. But quite frankly, we're in 2021 right now, and quite frankly, this whole social justice stuff, I think it needs to be toned down a little bit because I think we're all equal, in my opinion.
Well, what would you say to progressives and maybe even some moderate Democrats who think that we've made a lot of progress in the last 50, 60 years, but that there are some obstacles that certain people face in this country? Would you agree with progressives and maybe some liberals and moderate Democrats on that?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with progressives when it comes to labor issues. I agree with them with raising the minimum wage to $15, and I agree with them on other issues as well and concerns with labor.
Hmm.
But then they started to stray away from the mainstream narrative of the Democratic Party when it comes to social and cultural issues.
That's interesting that you say that because because $15 minimum wage, that is something that Joe Biden is proposing, and the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has just released some of the estimates of what raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour will do, and progressives are on board with it, and some moderates are on board with it, but some moderates are kind of split on this issue in the Democratic Party. One of the things that it's estimated to do is it's going to lift a lot of people out of poverty, and it's going to lift a large percentage of those minimum wage workers out of poverty. But at the same time, it's also estimated that the minimum wage increase to $15 an hour will also cost 1.4 million jobs. That's an estimate. Now, 1.4 million sounds like a lot. It is a lot compared to the rest of the country. It's not. It's not that a big percentage, and even in New York City, 1.4 million is not a big percentage. But these are still individuals. And it's also going to probably, according to the CBO, it's also going to increase the debt by about $54 billion over 10 years. Which, to be honest, I'm a fiscal conservative. I care about debts and deficits, but $54 billion over 10 years doesn't sound like a lot compared to what we've gone through with the Trump years or the Obama years.
Well, from what I've heard, approximately, I think it's what 3 million people work for minimum wage,
Uh-huh.
which is the federal minimum wage right now is what $7.25.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Regardless of where Democrats stand on the $15 minimum wage, I think all Democrats or most Democrats can agree that there needs to be an increase, especially since the last one was in like 2009 or 2010.
Well, I also think that this increase in the minimum wage will also put more money into circulation as well. That $15 increase could maybe people will be able to afford another car, maybe, or a newer car, or
Hmm.
maybe buy certain things, which will be like a kind of a jump start to the local economy in a lot of areas.
I definitely agree with you on that. I think that the more money, there's a talking point, a Democratic talking point, which I happen to agree with, that says when the richest people get money, they invest it in the stock market. However, when middle class people and working poor people get money, they spend it and it goes into the economy. So I assume that you would agree with that statement.
Yeah, I agree with that. It makes a lot of sense because if you think about it, if somebody is purchasing more things, it's going to create more jobs. Even if it's luxury things, or necessary things, they're going to be providing more jobs and more income for businesses, and businesses are going to expand. So it's kind of like instead of trickle down economics, it's trickle up economics.
That's a very, very good point. And the trickle up economics and the trickle down economics are not necessarily as black and white as people would like to suggest. For instance, I don't believe by and large in trickle down economics. I'm not a big fan of Ronald Reagan's philosophy of trickle down. But what I would say is that President Obama, when he ran for president in 2012 for re-election, he did say to Mitt Romney on the stage and to the moderator during their debate, their first debate, I believe it was, that the corporate tax rate was too high and that it needs to be lowered. And I believe President Obama wanted to lower it to 28%. And I believe that he was unsuccessful in that, but also at the same time, Obama did his second term in office, we did see a tremendous amount of job growth. So, is there a case to be made that keeping corporate taxes low, but also doing it in a responsible way, uh, could actually create some opportunity for middle income and low income individuals?
I believe so. New Jersey is known for being a really tough place for doing business, and I think that it's better it's in our interest if we attract more businesses to New Jersey. Um, if they could lower corporate taxes for businesses in New Jersey, maybe we could retain and attract more businesses. Recently, Mercedes Benz North America left New Jersey and went
Mm-hmm.
to Atlanta. Right now, Nabisco, that factory up in Fairlawn, is leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we could have it both ways. You could raise the minimum wage and also lower corporate taxes to keep the jobs here.
Well, that was my biggest objection with the GOP tax plan was that they did give, and I don't object to corporate tax cuts if they make sense, but this increased the deficit and the debt at a time when it didn't really need to be increased. And the fact, and I said on Facebook, and I got my head handed to me by a bunch of my Republican friends. I said, okay, as long as we're lowering corporate taxes, why not raise minimum wage to ensure that some of that money goes down? And some of these ideologically pure Republicans just were like, no, we shouldn't do anything by force. Yet this tax plan was done by force, so I don't get it.
Exactly. It's like the right wingers. They don't want to harm businesses, but yet they want things to be done voluntarily. Which, you're right. Raising or lowering taxes is a government way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So just expecting people to just do the good things voluntarily is just unreasonable, in my opinion.
Well, it's unreasonable considering the fact that, as you've just said, why can people can't lower their own taxes? I mean, middle class people cannot lower their taxes, and therefore, and middle class people can't necessarily raise their salaries. I mean, it depends on the individual and depends on the company that they're working for. People do get raises occasionally, but sometimes that has nothing to do with your work ethic or anything like that. Sometimes it has to do with tenure. I mean, so if we're going to involve government in the business of lowering taxes for corporations, why can't we involve them in the business of raising wages for working people? I don't get it.
Exactly. It's like it's not one or the other. You could do it both ways. Like for example, you just said that the average middle class person can't really raise their wage. Well, if they're part of a union, they could collectively bargain for higher wages. But then that's also a turnoff for a lot of corporations and businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But if they lower the business corporate taxes, then maybe they can afford to pay their employees a little bit more. So it's really, another sense of circulating more money into the economy.
I agree with you on that, and actually, it's funny that you mentioned Nabisco because that news story came out today. I don't know if it's making national news because, as you know, you and I are both here in New Jersey, me being in the southern
Hmm.
part and you being in the northern part. But that was 600 jobs that are going to be leaving the state of New Jersey. And for our Jersey listeners, because I know we have a few, what do you think has contributed? What do you think has contributed to Nabisco leaving the state of New Jersey, and what can people out of state learn from what has just happened here in the Garden State?
Well, I used to live in Fair Lawn, and I used to pass by that Nabisco factory all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to apply for a job there one time, and they told me that I got to go through the hiring hall or something like that. But anyways, I just think a lot of businesses are leaving New Jersey. A lot of businesses, man. If you really do your research, a lot of trucking industries they want to get out of New Jersey. Nabisco's leaving. Mercedes-Benz of North America left. Just New Jersey is just not a place where people want to do business, man. It's just not a very business friendly environment.
How long do you think it has been a business friendly environment for?
Well, I moved here in New Jersey around the early 2000s, so I don't know. I think this is all started in the 2010 maybe. New Jersey is known for having crazy property taxes. They're known for being, charging you a fee for everything.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to stop charging a fee for everything. They really need to. As a truck driver, I own my own truck. I have to pay $1,500 every year to register my truck here in New Jersey. I know a lot of truck drivers who own their own trucks. We call them owner-operators. They register their truck in Indiana or in Oklahoma or in Texas because it's just way cheaper excuse me, to register your truck over there. The tolls here are high. The fuel tax here is high. It's just everything's more expensive here in New Jersey, and I think that the progressive Democrats really don't see that. They don't care. And the more moderate Democrats and blue dog Democrats care about that, and they want to lower it. But then these progressives are always accusing them of saying, "Oh, you're pandering to the corporate America. They ridicule the more moderate Democrats for this. But in reality, they're just being rational and centrist. You don't have good things coming when you go to the extreme left or the extreme right."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's become, corporate Democrat and corporate America have sort of become the talking points for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. It's almost like the Tea Party wing always using socialism as a dirty word in the Republican side. That's what I've noticed with the extremes. But for those who don't know, here in New Jersey, our governor, Phil Murphy, I think he's done a decent job with the pandemic, but in other ways, I think that he really wasn't as business friendly as I would have liked for him to have been business friendly. And I can't say exactly why that was the case. I know that he wants to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour here in New Jersey. He might not have to if the federal minimum wage does get raised to $15, but that's still up for debate and up for grabs at this point. And Governor Murphy, when he first got into office, I'll be perfectly honest, I was not a big fan of him. It took me a few years to actually start to like him because I felt like he was being a bit of a dictator and more of a my way or the highway kind of guy when it came to things like, he didn't see a spending increase that he didn't. He never saw a spending increase that he didn't dislike. That he didn't dislike. Yeah. And I think that was one of the problems, and it wound up being that there was this party infighting in the New Jersey Democratic Party among two of our leaders in New Jersey, Phil Murphy, and then Senate President Steve Sweeney, who is actually my representative, my senator, and he does a great job, and I really like Steve Sweeney. Steve Sweeney is the more moderate of the New Jersey Democratic delegation. But Steve Sweeney actually proposed some pension reforms that got a lot of the public sector unions in New Jersey pissed off. The Communication Workers Association, the NJEA, which is the New Jersey Educators Association, the teachers union. What do you think of what Sweeney proposed with the public pension reform for some workers?
To be honest, I don't know anything about his pension reform. I haven't done my research on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well,
but I'm the opposite of you, though. When I used to be a fan of Governor Murphy, and now I don't like him anymore because I just think that he's being his knee-jerk reaction to everything is just too severe. I remember a few years ago, every time there was rumors of snow, he would just declare a state of emergency. And with this whole pandemic, he's shutting down businesses, which I don't agree with. I don't really think that the government should be telling us how to run our business. They should tell us, keep social distancing, wear your mask, this and that. But it's not up to them to babysit us or spoil us or anything like that. But I don't really know much about the Sweeney pension, his plan or anything like that. Although I do know for a fact that New Jersey has high property taxes because New Jersey is known for having a very, very, very nice big fat pension plan for their state workers.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge advocate for town consolidation.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's too many towns. There's too many public employees. The public employee union is very, very powerful here in New Jersey, especially the NJEA.
Mm-hmm.
They're funded I think they gave $5,000 to the Murphy campaign.
Oh yeah.
And it's just it comes to a point where you could be pro union, pro labor, but it comes to a point where they become so powerful that they become practically the de facto politicians. They just raise the fees and the collective bargaining power, and the taxpayers have to pay for it. So that's one problem that New Jersey has.
Well, that's a very excellent point. You and I are both pro-union individuals. I'm not against teachers' unions. I really am not. But what I am against is the fact that a lot of the unions that were protesting Steve Sweeney's pension reform plan have not really. I mean, up until recently, they actually did come to an agreement, the NJEA and Steve Sweeney, and I think was very good. But what I will say is that Steve Sweeney is a very powerful guy in the state of New Jersey, and he actually took one question off the ballot that the NJEA really wanted on the ballot. And he took it off in, I can't remember which year it was, but it was between 2013 and 2016, I believe. And because of that one move, the NJEA decided that they were going to bully Sweeney and endorse his Republican opponent, despite the fact that the Republican opponent would, without a doubt, have been much worse for public education. His name was Fran Grenier, and he basically said that teachers weren't taxpayers because they were receiving tax money. He basically compared them welfare recipients, if you want to know the truth, and they endorsed him just because they wanted to send a message to Steve Sweeney. So Steve Sweeney, some of these unions think that Steve Sweeney proposed this pension reform because he wanted to get back at them. I'm not sure that's the case. I think that when you have someone like Phil Murphy, who is a big government spending kind of guy, and he made all these promises to the unions to get elected. The NJEA was behind him 100% from day one. The problem is that these public pension plans, every dollar that we're making, from what I heard, in taxes is going to these pension plans. So why would we not reform them for newer workers and people who are not already in the system? It's not to say that we're going to take away the pension plans from people who have been in the system for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, but we are saying that if you're going to go into the education field for public education in New Jersey, we simply can't kick the can down the road and tax our way out of this. I mean, the public sector unions were calling for a millionaire's tax to make the pension payments, and I don't see why there shouldn't be pension reform at this point here in New Jersey. I mean, based on that, what do you think?
Well, one issue too that we got to remember is some of these pensioners, some of these retired teachers or retired state workers, they don't live in New Jersey anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big problem because we're expecting them to contribute back to the local economy. We're paying to their pension. We want them to pay back and, buy local stuff. But instead, some of them are retiring to Florida, Arizona, California, and they're receiving our tax dollar, our pension money, and they're spending it in another state. So if they're gonna do some sort of pension reform plan, I think they should require everybody to stay here in New Jersey to collect their pension. I know it might sound authoritarian, but it's not fair for the taxpayers to pay for somebody to live in another state.
Right. Well, the thing is that I understand why people might have to move out because New Jersey is a very expensive state, but the people who have received their pensions, even with their pensions, some of them have moved out of the state because they can't afford to live here anymore because the property taxes are so high. So why not reform the pensions? Why not make it a little easier on the people of New Jersey who are not necessarily in the public sector and getting this pension? Switch them to something else. There are some people who are just so unreasonable and think that new teachers shouldn't make any sacrifices, and I don't see that, and I don't want to declare this open season on teachers because you and I both remember the Christie years, and it was open season on teachers, and I didn't
Yeah.
like Christie for that.
Yeah, I felt bad for the teachers during the Christie administration. He really hammered hard on the teachers. But again, you have to find a balance, though. It's a
Right.
balance. But this also, I don't know if you know much about this think tank. It's called the New Jersey Perspective Policy. They're behind a lot of what Governor Murphy is promoting as well, a lot.
Mm.
And I read this. I read this article from the president of the NJ, New Jersey Policy Perspective. He was talking about the outward migration, how it's not a bad thing because the people who are leaving, they're less diverse, and we're getting more immigrants over here. And that's another issue too because people are leaving, and we're getting, people are leaving. People who had so many years in this state are leaving, and it's just the progressives. They don't really care about whether you're leaving or not. They just care about, I don't know. It's just they just don't care about lowering taxes. They say they do, but they don't want to lower taxes.
To tell you the truth, it's not as easy as someone might make it seem. I will give Chris Christie some credit because he did have that property tax cap, if I'm not mistaken, which did offer some bit of relief. But he also raised the gas tax to fund the transportation trust fund, which may have been. I mean, as a trucker, I'm sure you have an opinion on it, but it may have been reasonable at the time. But part of that exchange, part of the reason the gas tax was raised was there was some compromise in it to make up for the gas tax increase. The sales tax went down, and Murphy raised that back up without doing anything about the gas tax, so that he could fund the pension some more.
Well, from what I've heard, okay, because there's a clause in the bill that says if revenue dropped to a certain point, then you have to increase fuel taxes. There was a clause.
Mm-hmm.
So when the pandemic started and Governor Murphy shut down businesses, New Jersey had a loss of revenue, which triggered the fuel increase to make up for that loss of revenue to keep up for the funding of roads. Now, I understand that. All right, I understand that we truck drivers use the road, so we got to pay for it. But if you really think about it, a lot of this money that we're paying into fuel taxes are going into roads to maintain roads that we're not even allowed to use. I'm going to give you an example. The Pulaski Skyway here, it connects Newark to Jersey City. We're not allowed on that road. No trucks are allowed on that road. But yet, the maintenance and the money that went into maintaining that road came from us, the truck drivers.
Hmm.
We pay an extra fee on tolls. We pay $125 just to cross the George W. Bridge. All right? And some of that money is used to fix the lower level, which we're not even allowed to use. So if you're going to increase our fuel taxes, at least have a way to separate the funding of, if you're gonna generate revenue from the trucking industry, use that funding to fix roads that we're allowed to use.
Mm-hmm.
Use that money to fix the ports, to increase port capacity for truck drivers because we're spending way too much time at the ports. We're wasting time. We're idling our truck, wasting fuel, causing pollution. So they need to use that fund and to put it back into the trucking industry, not just for all general maintenance of all the roads that we're not even allowed to use. And another thing too, as well, is now because of the pandemic, fuel taxes have went up in Pennsylvania and upstate New York across the entire country. Yet we don't have any leverage. Truck drivers, 77% of the truck drivers at the ports are independent contractors, and we cannot unionize. We cannot come together. We cannot collectively bargain for better wages or better working conditions because of the antitrust laws. So, that's one thing. If these progressive Democrats claim to be so pro-worker, then they should reevaluate how the antitrust laws pertain to owner-operators and independent contractors.
So are these antitrust laws because of progressive Democrats, or who's responsible for these laws?
Well, back in the 1890s, somebody named Sherman, it was a few congressmen back in the old days during the Industrial Revolution that came up with the antitrust laws to prevent businesses from coming together and price fixing, which is important, which is a good thing. But back then, independent contractors didn't exist. There was no such thing as an independent contractor. So now, fast forward to 2021, now you have these owner operators who, according to the IRS, were small businesses, but according to the U.S. Department of Transportation, we are leased under a mega carrier. So, we're stuck in this gray area where we're not quite fully independent businessmen, but we're not quite simply employees as well. And a few people are exempt from the antitrust laws: labor unions, utility companies, cable companies, insurance companies, baseball players, farming organizations. They're all exempt from the antitrust laws. So all I'm saying is extend it a little bit more to include independent contractors.
That's interesting. We got into a whole topic about local government here in New Jersey, which I think is important because we've discussed national issues on this program.
Oh, we do? All right.
But we haven't really gotten into local issues, and there's that old saying that all politics is local. So I think that's really good. So we've discussed some of the so basically we've discussed some of the differences between progressive Democrats and moderate to conservative Democrats here in New Jersey, using the New Jersey issues. Now, what do you think some of the things that we can agree on are as Blue Dogs, and what do you think we can agree with progressives on?
I think Blue Dogs and progressives can agree on labor issues, pro-union. Manchin from West Virginia, he's a very big union guy. He loves his coal miners out there, and he looks out for those people out there. So I think both progressives and Blue Dog Democrats can agree on labor issues. I think they can both agree on also when it comes to, I don't want to say environment. The Democrats care about the environments, but I think the progressives go a little bit way too far. They got to see it from a rational point of view. But I think they both kind of agree on environmental issues, which is an important issue.
Mm-hmm.
But and also, I think the Democrats and the progressives can agree on inclusivity, diversity. They both emphasize that diversity is important. They definitely don't want to exclude anybody. But again, the progressives take it to a whole different level. They kind of come off as like anti-American sometimes when it comes to inclusivity. But I think they could both agree on those three issues to a certain degree.
That's an excellent point, and I think that was those are there are some differences, but within those differences there are similarities, is what I'm understanding that you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's everything is not black and white, like you said. It just depends how far you want to go with it and how extreme you want to go with it. I think that Blue Dog Democrats and progressives can agree on a lot of issues, but they just gotta meet each other. They just gotta meet each other in the middle. That's what I'm trying to say. They just got to meet each other in the middle on certain issues. A lot of progressives, they get frustrated with moderate Democrats because they think that they're not left-leaning enough. And if you go on social media, you see a lot of progressives calling centrists just, they're dinos, they're Democrats in name only. Well, it comes to a point where if you lean so far left, you're no longer appealing no more. You're not appealing to your constituents. I don't see any progressives ever winning in West Virginia or in Kentucky or in Tennessee.
No.
So I don't know. Some of these progressives, they seem to think they just lean a little bit more left, a little bit more left. They're going to attract more people. But it's the opposite. If you lean more left, you're going to lose more people.
Depending on where you are, that's true. I know, for instance, progressive Democrats do just fine in Massachusetts. It's fine to be progressive in Massachusetts. You can win. Manchin cannot afford to be progressive in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, definitely not.
West Virginia used to be a very Democratic state.
I think Manchin is teetering. He's like on the fence right now. He has to play. He has to play a very fragile balancing act because if he leans too far left, he could lose his seat. If he leans too far right, he could lose his seat too.
Right, it's a balancing act. You're completely right. And I do have to ask, what don't you think that there seems to be this unspoken rule in Democratic politics that the further to the left you are, the more of a good Democrat you are. But don't you think there's such a thing as being too far left to be a Democrat?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like once you go into like the socialist communist area, you're not a Democrat anymore. Because remember, during the '60s and '50s, the Democrats were staunchly very anti-communist and socialist with the whole Cold War going on. Now that the Cold War is over, people seem to think like, okay, now it's all right to be a communist and a socialist. And if you really think about it, like look at what happened in Venezuela, look at what happened in Cuba or North Korea. Communism and socialism does not work. It does not work. Now, everything in moderation, though. Everything in moderation is good, but if you lean too far left, you're no longer a Democrat. That's it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, a lot of these far leftists, they don't even want to associate themselves with the Democratic Party because they think they're too centrist.
Right, and I think the opposite. I think the Democratic Party has moved further to the left. I think that Joe Biden's trying to fix that, but I think that I think there are they accuse centrists of wanting to implement Republican policies in the Democratic proposals. But the thing is, I could say that the progressives are trying to implement Green Party policies into the Democratic Party's platform and proposals because some of these progressive Democrats voted for Jill Stein or Bernie Sanders in 2016 as opposed to voting for Hillary Clinton.
Well, Hillary Clinton was just really unpopular with everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's, so I think she would have been a great president. She definitely is qualified. She has the experience, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to likability. And if you're liked, Donald Trump was well liked by a lot of people, even though he was kind of like far fetched. But it all comes down to likability. Some people pride themselves voting third party too. They don't want to know them. They don't want to be associated with the mainstream politicians, so they pride themselves voting for third party, which is kind of a waste of a vote, in my opinion, sometimes. But I really do hope that one day in the future we do have more diversity and more third options that are really realistic, in my opinion.
See, this is actually an area where you and I disagree, so this is great. Even though we're both blue dog Democrats, I think that the two-party system is necessary. I think that it's good to have two parties which are big tents, very different people, all fighting together for a common goal. That's what I like about the two-party system. I believe in it. But I understand the frustration of people like you who think that the two-party system's not working. I think a lot of people are of that mind as well.
Well, if you think about it too, like the Republican Party is having a really hard time. They're having an identity crisis right now because there's the pro-Trump, they're very extreme, and then there's just a regular conservative, Christian conservative party. And a lot of these politicians are having a hard time trying to cater to both. They want to get both support from the Trump party, from Trump camp, and the conservatives. In here in New Jersey, John Bremnick, he criticizes Trump all the time, and I've seen his Twitter comment. A lot of Republicans criticize him for that. They call him a rhino, but he's not really a rhino though. He's a true conservative Republican. The only rhinos, in my opinion, are the Trump supporters because a lot of Trump supporters weren't politically enthusiastic until Trump ran, and now all of a sudden they're politically enthusiastic. So if you want to label anybody a rhino, it's the Trump supporters.
So true, so true. Two questions, and then we're going to go. What do you think is going to happen in 2022 with the midterms?
I think that the Democrats are going to for the midterms. They might lose a few seats out in the Midwest, but I think they're very, very safe here in New Jersey, the Northeast. I'm more focused on the local election, and this upcoming November, we're going to be voting for all the state assemblymen, state senators, and governor. I'm not a fan of Murphy anymore, so I'm going to throw my support for Jack Ciattarelli. I spoke with Jack Chattarelli. I met with him at the Port Driver Association's office. He's a very rational guy, very rational. Um, he's just he's I think that New Jersey needs to give a Republican a chance every now and again, especially right now with the high property taxes. Recently, if you go on the internet, you'll see that New Jersey is ranked the highest per capita on debt. And that's not a coincidence because Murphy, like you said, he likes to spend and not think about the future. But I think Jack Chatterelli is very rational and he cares about balancing the budget and lowering property taxes.
Yeah, I am voting for Murphy this November, but I'm actually more focused on getting Steve Sweeney reelected because Steve Sweeney, even though he belongs to the party that the governor is registered with, Steve Sweeney has been a voice of reason, and I think getting Steve Sweeney elected is a big priority for us here in South Jersey.
Oh yeah, I like Steve Sweeney. I try to reach out to him a few times. I think Steve Sweeney is more focused on South Jersey, which it's okay. Somebody to focus on South Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
But up here in the port area, we're trying to get politically active. We're a potential base for support.
Mm-hmm.
We are a base for support. Every time a Democrat runs for office here in New Jersey in the north, they go straight to the longshoremen for support, but they never come to the truck drivers. Why? Because they don't see us united. They don't see us unionized. But with the power of social media, they can really appeal to the truck drivers. But Steve Sweeney, he's a cool guy and everything. I would like to meet him in person one day. But, until then, I guess, I support him.
He's a great listener, and he's a doer. That's what I like about him. He hears people out, he addresses their concerns, and he really takes the time, and that's what I love about Steve Sweeney. And my last
Before
question...
Before we go, though, I want to comment also that I saw a video of him. He really pushed hard to get this windmill turbine wind energy farm off the coast of South Jersey, which is a great thing. Awesome, some empty land by the Delaware River, and he really advocated and lobbied for a wind turbine farm off the coast of New Jersey, which is an awesome thing. It's great.
You're talking about Steve Sweeney.
Yeah, Steve Sweeney and Donald Norcross. They really pushed hard to get this wind turbine energy farm off the coast of South Jersey.
They do great things for us here in South Jersey. I mean, I know Steve Sweeney is really he's community oriented. I mean, from everything. We have a nuclear power plant in Salem County, and Steve Sweeney, I think in 2003, fought for the security after 9/11. He fought for the guards at the Salem nuclear power plant to have assault weapons, which I think is a very good idea, and I think it did pass. I mean, it is a terrorist attack, so a terrorist target, so that does make sense. But he's always done well for South Jersey, and I think he's earned re-election.
I don't know why you don't run for governor. I mean,
I think he should run for governor. I
real New Jersey guy.
I hope he does run for governor. It's just that now's probably not his time to primary Murphy because Murphy has shown leadership abilities, excellent leadership abilities during this crisis. You might not agree with every one of his decisions. I certainly don't, but he's proven himself to be a good leader.
Yeah, he shows motivation. He shows that he really cares.
Right.
But again, his knee-jerk reaction is just too severe. Too severe, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And my last question: what do you think of Joe Biden so far as president? How would you grade him?
So far he's doing okay. I don't agree with him shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline. He's catering to the extreme environmentalist groups. And he caused a lot of union jobs to be canceled. I disagree with that on him, but so far he's doing okay. He's not being super controversial. He's putting the U.S. back into multilateral agreements at the UN, which is a good thing. We can't go at this by ourselves. We have to have our allies with us. But besides, I think it's too early to really judge. But again, I don't agree with this shutdown with the Keystone pipeline. But other than that, though, he's doing all right.
I'd give him an A-. What about you?
Yeah, I'll give him an A-. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Well, Richie, the trucker from North Jersey, thank you so much for joining me on the Blue Dog Whisperer. Come back anytime. We'd love to have you.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, and thank you, everyone, for listening to our podcast. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.